Imagine waking up to a trembling world, every volcano on Earth, rumbling, boiling, ready to burst. From Iceland to Indonesia, the planet takes one final, fiery breath. The sky darkens, ash columns rise like black towers, piercing the clouds. Within hours, sunlight begins to fade, replaced by a deep red twilight. Mount Etna, Fuji, Kilimanjaro, Vesuvius, and Yellowstone all awaken together. Their roars merge into a single voice, the heartbeat of an angry planet. Molten rivers carve through forests and cities. The world becomes a canvas of fire and smoke, painted in shades of despair. Within 12 hours, more than 1,000 volcanoes release over 100 gigatons of ash and sulfur into the sky, enough to dim the sunday for years. Airports close, satellites flicker, the day turns into permanent dusk. People light candles at noon, unsure if sunlight will ever return. Temperatures drop within days. Ash clouds encircle the planet, reflecting sunlight back into space. Earth begins to cool rapidly. Rain turns acidic, rivers choke on ash, the smell of sulfur fills the air, breathing becomes an act of courage. Lightning dances within the ash clouds, volcanic lightning, a chaotic ballet of fire and electricity. The sky becomes a storm of both light and death. From orbit, Earth now looks like a dying ember, a glowing wound beneath a shroud of black. Civilization enters its longest night. The sun fades into a dull red disk, then vanishes completely. Noon feels like midnight. The world forgets what daylight looks like. Ash falls like snow, soft, silent, deadly. It blankets homes, mountains and oceans, burying the planet beneath its own breath. Airplanes grounded, solar panels useless, crops dying in the fields. Humanity watches helplessly as nature switches off the light. Volcanic ash reflects sunlight away, cooling the planet by several degrees each week. The global average temperature begins to collapse. Within a month, the ocean's surfaces begin to freeze. Sea ice expands toward the equator. Ships become prisons trapped in crystal water. Forests fall silent. Photosynthesis stops. Leaves turn gray, brittle, and lifeless. The lungs of the planet forget how to breathe. Animals migrate in confusion, birds circling endlessly, whales stranded in frozen bays. Evolution itself pauses, waiting for warmth that never comes. The ash clouds carry sulfur dioxide, forming acid rain. Rivers become toxic ribbons. Lakes turn black. Life begins to dissolve. From orbit, Earth no longer glows blue. It has turned gray, pale, and bruised. The planet looks less like a home, and more like a memory. Cities adapt. Artificial domes glow faintly. In the darkness, humanity creates its own tiny suns, fragile, flickering, and finite. Scientists call it a volcanic winter. Ash and sulfur block the sun, scattering light back into space. Earth becomes a planet of shadows. Every eruption adds its own poison, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, and fine ash that drifts for years before falling back to Earth. Without sunlight, global temperatures fall by 10 degrees Celsius in weeks. The equator feels like winter. Snow begins to fall in the Amazon rainforest. The oceans cool from the top down. Coral reefs die, first followed by plankton, the invisible engines of our atmosphere. As sunlight fades, the carbon cycle halts. The atmosphere stops breathing. Every human breath adds carbon, but nothing absorbs it. Researchers estimate that if all volcanoes erupted at once, global sunlight would drop by 90%. Photosynthesis would stop completely. This is the just theory. It happened before. 74,000 years ago, when the Toba supervolcano erupted in Indonesia, releasing 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash. Toba's eruption cooled the Earth by 6 degrees for nearly a decade. Some scientists believe it reduced humanity to fewer than 10,000 survivors. Later, in 1815, Mount Tambora erupted, the largest in recorded history. The next year was known as the year without a summer. If every volcano erupted together, it wouldn't be a year without summer. It would be a century without hope. Governments collapse under chaos. Borders vanish as survival replaces politics. Humanity becomes one nation, under ash. Food becomes currency, light becomes luxury. The warmth of a fire is worth more than gold. Underground shelters grow into cities, subways, mines, and caves become humanity's lost homes, glowing with artificial suns. Above ground silence rules. The world of sound becomes the world of echoes, wind, ash, and the occasional distant eruption. The air thickens. Every breath is filtered. Every step deliberate outside. The ash lies knee-deep, a gray sea swallowing everything. The stars disappear behind the ash curtain. Nights are absolute. The human eye forgets color, seeing only shades of gray and memory. Art survives underground. Painters use ash for pigment. Writers carve on stone walls. Musicians play the rhythm of survival. Science continues. In frozen labs, researchers study volcanic particles, hoping to find a way to clear the skies or restart the cycle of sunlight. Children born in the dark learn myths of light. To them the sun is a legend, a golden god that once warmed the world. And yet, humanity endures even under ash, even in silence. We refuse extinction. The will to live burns brighter than any volcano. After years of darkness, the ash begins to settle. The sun, faint but alive, returns through the gray. Humanity sees daylight again. The earth exhales, rivers flow again, plants push through the soot, and the first birds return to the sky. Life, impossibly, restarts. But the planet is changed. Forests are gone, oceans darker, the air thinner, a new earth, reborn from ruin. Archaeologists of the future will find our cities buried in ash, modern Pompeii, frozen in the instant of our arrogance. The survivors rebuild not higher but wiser. Underground shelters become temples. Solar lamps are worshipped like relics of a forgotten god. Children learn that the world once burned not by war, but by the earth itself. Nature's fury needs no enemy, only imbalance. Scientists warn this could happen again. The planet's crust still breathes, its pressure still builds. The earth is calm, for now. We once thought fire was ours to control, but in truth, it was always the earth's, ancient, patient, and waiting. The lesson is simple. Civilization is temporary, nature, eternal. Every empire burns. Every mountain remembers. One eruption could block the sun forever, but for now, the earth sleeps, and beneath our feet, the fire still dreams.